Hello, nerds and nerdettes. Welcome back to the channel where once again we have a new review for you guys on a recently released Rick Remender title. It seems like it's Rick Remender era here on the Illuminati channel. But before we get into any details about the book or into the brunt of the review, quick reminder that if you are looking for this book or any of the other books that I've reviewed, to use the channel sponsor organicpricebooks.com. Use the discount code STAYNERDY for $2 off your order, or when ordering 3 or more books, use the code STAYNERDY, ship it together for 5% off that order. Also, for my manga lovers, I am a Right Stuff affiliate, so if you'd like to help support the channel, you can head into the description, use my Right Stuff link, and I'll be extremely thankful for that. But without further ado, let's get into the details of the book. So this does have a cover price of $39.99 and a page count of 336 pages. Yes, 336 pages, kept mixing those up for some reason. This does collect issues 1 through 11, so it's not a very massive book or massive series, but it is a very interesting one, and I'll explain why during the overhead shots. And here we are, a recent release by Rick Remender, A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance. This is the size of all of his hardcovers, which is library size. Here we have the cover, a very beautiful setting. And then taking a quick look at the spine, fairly simple, very similar to all of his stories, or all of his hardcovers rather. And then on the back, you have another setting. The front and back setting are fairly significant, but I guess we can get into that during the overhead shots, or you can kind of figure that out once you read the book yourself. But let's go ahead and get into the book. And getting right into the book, we do have some blue end sheets, pale blue, I guess. A blank white page. A title page. A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance. And then we have the creators. We have Rick Remender, the writer on all of this series, issues 1 through 11. And then as far as the artist goes, we have Andre Lima Araujo. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. Probably not. I'll probably just be referencing him as Andre Lima. And then we have Chris O'Halloran on colors and Russ Wooten on letters. And then after that, we get right into the first issue. You do have the issue cover on the left side and the contents of the issue, or the beginning of the issue on the right side. I don't know why I'm stumbling over that. So as you guys can probably tell almost immediately, this is a extremely dialogue light story. There is maybe at its peak 10 speech bubbles on a 2-page spread, so very little actual reading. This story is much more of a art adventure, or a art style of storytelling, where the art is much more forward than the actual dialogue. Obviously, the script, the writing, what the story is still done by Rick Remender, but Andre Lima is really the storyteller here, letting his art be the storytelling vehicle for this particular story and these particular characters. But a little bit about the story, we do pick up with our main character, who we do, way later in the book, find out his name is Sonny. And you also find out that he is a assassin for hire that gets contracts through the dark web or the dark app. I don't know how that works, not an assassin myself, but he does get contracts, and due to said contracts, he goes a little bit about his contracts in a different way than your usual assassin would. But obviously don't want to get too deep into how that is. But because of some circumstances and some paths that he ends up crossing, he does end up with the responsibility of taking care of a young boy. And that's really where the story then begins, because through strictly art, pretty much, you do find out that the contract that Sonny accepted and the contract that this young boy plays a part in has a very sinister reason for coming to exist. And really, you have no clue, skipping that page, because this is definitely not child friendly, FYI, for those of you watching. But you do find that the contract that Sonny came across is not a typical contract. It has a very sinister beginning and a very specific reason for coming to be. And really, Sonny kind of gets trapped in the middle of those people trying to tread very lightly here. There's not a very heavy or dense story here, so it's very easy to give away pretty much everything that takes place. But Sonny does end up being involved in this sinister plot that does involve this child and the contract that he has been hired to complete. Really, you don't find out the actual depth of why that contract has come to be until the very end, and I'm talking the final 3 pages of the final issue, where everything kind of starts to connect and make sense. And I think that is a very interesting thing that Rick Remender does quite a bit throughout his stories. This included, even though there's not much dialogue at all, he still somehow finds a way for the story to circle back to the beginning during the end, which I am personally a huge fan of. I do think this is great for new readers in comics because of how undialogue heavy it is. You don't really need to sit down and dedicate weeks on end to read this. You could probably finish this in a sitting if you really just buckled down and focused, but I will recommend to definitely take in the panels, take in the panel work, the artwork, the storytelling that you're still seeing, just not through words, because Andre Lima's art is outstanding. It's beautiful, paired with the colorist. It's just, it pops off the page. It's realistic in its emotion, but cartoony in its kind of simplest forms when you kind of first initially look at a panel, until you see the characters' emotions and even their movements in a actual panel, and it starts to just really flow together almost like a storyboard of a movie. And honestly, while reading this, it almost did play like a movie, because I could just move from panel to panel, page to page, and it all almost blended into one singular massive issue with no cuts in between while reading, and it was absolutely such a interesting ride. And I do commend Rick Remender for being ambitious and kind of tackling a title like this. This is the only title that I can really think of that has this few of words actually in it, and I commend him for really going after that and trying to accomplish that style of storytelling and really letting his artist do more of the storytelling than even he himself. But absolutely great. I don't think it's Rick Remender's strongest title. If I'm introducing somebody to Rick Remender, this won't be the one I recommend, but it still is super interesting. I was beyond pumped to actually get into this book, because I remember when it was coming out in single issues, I knew it was something I wanted to check out. So I'm happy I was able to read it and actually get it under my belt. But we are at the final issue, and that is where I'm going to stop, because like I said, it does wrap around and reveal a lot during the end portion of this issue. So we will stop there and head to the extras, take a quick look at those. So we do have some variant covers from a number of artists, and then obviously some character sketches as well, and then some Virgin panels, just inks. Very interesting story, very ambitious, but let's head back to the table for some closing thoughts. And welcome back, nerds and nerdettes. So as I touched on during the overhead shots, this is a very interesting story, mainly because of the fact that it does not use dialogue or speech bubbles really during its storytelling. It is much more panel to panel, art forward when it does come to the storytelling. So it's very interesting when reading through this book, and I really cannot emphasize enough just how light on dialogue this book actually is. This book probably took me about 2 hours to get halfway, and that's me really taking in the art on each panel, which is something that I really do recommend you to do because Andre Lima is a architect and a wonderful artist, and his character designs, his paneling, his backgrounds, especially when it pertains to buildings, sceneries, streets even, are absolutely beautiful. I cannot emphasize that enough either. Definitely take in the art and enjoy the story and the style of storytelling that you're getting from this book. But it is a fairly Rick Remender-esque story, especially when it comes to the ending. Rick Remender typically does have some form of a twist or a mystery being resolved when it comes to the end of his stories or the wrap up of his stories. And you do have that kind of taking place in this. I do feel like that mystery was a little bit more predictable than in a lot of his other stories that I've read so far, but still, it was fairly enjoyable all in all. I also know that a Rick Remender kind of trope is he does have some political elements throughout his story. Look at Tokyo Ghost or The Scumbag. I did do reviews of those on my channel, but those are examples of where he really kind of integrates political aspects into his story overall. And I have seen some reviews or some people talking about this particular book where they do touch on that Rick Remender was fairly political in his storytelling through this book, but I don't necessarily agree. I don't feel like it had a political element really at all. It maybe because of the inclusion of the mayor or the presidential candidate or the way he is designed, but other than that, I don't necessarily think it was that political of a story overall. It's also not a very dense story. You probably have one name, maybe, or two names to really memorize throughout this entire book that end up actually mattering in the end. Everyone else pretty much barely speaks, or they don't really last that long, trying to avoid spoilers there, but definitely a very interesting story. Again, a very ambitious story. That's one thing I am noticing from Rick Remender, from Scumbag, as well as this one, that his style of storytelling and the risks that he's willing to take are very ambitious, and I am very impressed with that ambition when it pertains to his titles. But all in all, I don't think this is the strongest Rick Remender title, but there's also not a whole lot there. If anything, more of this praise can go more towards the artist than the actual writer, because like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of dialogue or storytelling throughout, even though I know it was Rick Remender's script and idea. The art is really what sings during this title. So all in all, I am going to give it a 6.8 out of 10. It is a lot of fun. It is very interesting and a quick read, so it does get some brownie points for that. But I don't think it's Rick Remender's strongest title, but it's definitely still worth a read. And that does wrap up today's review. Thank you so much for watching. I know this was recently released, and Rick Remender has a fairly divisive audience overall. Like, most people either love him or some hate him. It really depends on the reader or who it is. But I would love to hear from you guys, our community, what you guys thought of the A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance, and if you thought it was just simply ambitious, or if it really moved you as a story overall because of the characters, setting, and what kind of took place. But comment down below, let me know, of course, and if you are not a part of the Illuminerdi, hit that subscribe button to join the community. Also, if you do me a favor and hit that thumbs up icon, it's a little gesture that means a lot to us here on the channel. And if you can also do yourself a favor, if you enjoyed this review, hit that bell icon. That way you can get notified anytime this channel puts out content. But other than that, thank you for watching once again. And of course, as always, stay nerdy.